Thank you, praise team. I love you guys. Sometimes I'm so caught up in worship as it should be, and I'm just focused on God and worship as it's designed to. But today I just was scanning the stage, realizing how blessed we are with our praise team, and I just love you guys. I appreciate you guys using your talents here at Zoah. We're honored and blessed to have you guys here. So let's just start right off. There's a story that I read. It's about a wealthy Englishman. He came downstairs one morning, and before he had entered the kitchen, he overheard his cook. So in the kitchen, and she's talking to herself, and she said, "Oh, if only I had a 5-pound note, I would be so content with that." So the wealthy Englishman, he quickly considered the matter, and wanting to see the woman satisfied and happy, he came in and gave her the 5-pound note, worth about $25 at that time. And the cook, she thanked him profusely, and the wealthy man left the room, but he waited outside the door to hear. He was just curious to see if the cook would express her gratitude to God and be thankful for the gift. And as soon as he left the room, the cook said to herself, "Why didn't I say 10 rather than 5? Do we ever find ourselves acting like that? How often do we find ourselves wanting more? And then when we get the more that we wanted, we move right on to wanting more than the more. That's the opposite of contentment. So what is true contentment? Someone said that contentment has been praised more and practiced less than any other condition in life. All the world lives in 2 tents, content and discontent. So which tent are you living in this morning? One of the greatest causes for Christian believers, we're talking Christians, the Christians in the room, we don't have the joy that the Bible promises, and part of the problem comes back to this idea of contentment. Erskine Mason has said, if a man is not content in the state that he is in, then he will not be content in the state he would be in, the state he wants to be in. So if we can't learn to be content where we're at, we'll never find contentment wherever we're at. I read a story about an elder in a church who he was this remarkable example of contentment. Like everybody was impressed with how satisfied, how content. And so somebody asked him the secret for contentment. And he said that it consists of nothing more than making the right use of my eyes. In whatever state I am, I first look up to heaven, and I remember that my principal business here is to get there. So I look up. Then I look down upon the earth. And I recall to mind how small of a piece I shall occupy when I die and I'm buried. All this stuff is temporary. But then I look around in the world and I observe the multitudes there are who are more unhappy than myself. Thus I learn where true happiness is placed, where all our cares must end, and what little reason I have to complain. So contentment is about making the right use of our eyes. In other words, it's a matter of how you look at things. That's the secret of contentment. How do you look at your life? How do you look at your circumstances? We come to the end of Philippians here, and we're in chapter 4 of Philippians, and there's a lot of different threads we can pull. There's a lot of stuff in chapter 4, but I'm going to focus in on this idea of contentment, because in chapter 4 of Philippians, Paul reveals that he has learned a secret to contentment. Paul discovered that contentment comes from spiritual realities rather than a focus on physical circumstances. And so there's 2 spiritual realities that we must place our trust in. And when we do, the result is contentment. The secret of contentment. The first thing is contentment comes from putting our trust in the unfailing power of God. The unfailing power of God. Let's look at Philippians chapter 4. And we're going to start in verse 10. You remember, one of the purposes of Philippians, if you remember, is it's a thank you letter. The Philippians have sent Paul a financial gift. They've sent Epaphroditus to deliver this gift to him, take up a collection to help support Paul in prison. And so part of the purpose of Philippians, he has other things he wants to tell them, but a big part of it is a thank you letter, thanking them for their gift. And that's where he's kind of getting to as he closes in verse 10. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. So he's like, you've been concerned all along, but this gift was your opportunity to show it. Good. And then he goes in verse 11. I am not saying that this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all of this through him who gives me strength. So Paul says he's learned a secret. We still like secrets today, don't we? I mean, how many books have you noticed on the bookshelf that you've been tempted to pick up, or articles that you've seen on a magazine cover, or links that you've clicked online because they claim to reveal a secret? The secret to losing unwanted belly fat, or the secret to getting out of debt, secret of healthy looking skin, the secret to retirement, the secret to a great marriage, the secret to the perfect meatloaf, the secret to, you go on and fill in the blanks with whatever it is. If someone has a secret to success, we want to hear it. We want to hear what the secret is. And Paul says he's learned the secret to contentment. One thing to note is that he says it's something he has learned. It doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come automatically. Contentment is something that you have to learn. You have to discover how to find contentment. Paul learned where true contentment can be found. But often we're slow learners, and we look for contentment in all the wrong places and don't seem to learn from our mistakes. Here's some places that we look for contentment in that are wrong, and the first one is it's the people you know. You know, if I can just hang out with the right people, you know, then that would make me content, that would make me happy. Now, I guess we welcome into the right social circles, kind of travel in the right circles, know the right people, be with the influencers, and then I would be content. We like to be liked. We want to be with the right people. That's why we like our social media. We love our likes and our shares and our retweets because it feels like people are responding to us. And not just our posts, but they like us. They like what we're doing. Actually, checking that Facebook and seeing that somebody new has liked or shared, it actually releases chemicals in the brain, the same as some drugs do. This chemical high is released when you look at that Facebook post and somebody's liked it or somebody's shared it. We like our likes. And we think that we can find contentment if we just have the right people, if the right people like us. Another wrong place we look for contentment is the positions that we hold. If I can just have the right job, or hold the right position, or have the right position, the right status, get that promotion that I want, or like land that dream job, get into that college. If I can just get in the right position, then I would be content. Another place we often find ourselves looking for contentment is the possessions that we have. If we just had enough money, if we had got to drive the nice cars or live in the expensive houses or go on the exotic vacations, if we just live that kind of life and have that kind of stuff, then I'd be content. And these are all lies from the enemy. Because the enemy knows that if he can keep us busy, keeping us distracted, looking for contentment in all these other areas, he knows we'll never learn the secret. We'll never discover the secret if we're too busy chasing these other things. But Paul learned something far different. He learned that he could be content, regardless of who he was with, regardless of what position he held, regardless of what possessions he had. Paul reported that there were times in his life, in his ministry, when he had more than enough. There's times where he had plenty, and there were other times when he was in need and he went hungry. But regardless of the circumstances, good or bad, he had learned that he could do all things through Christ who gave him strength. That was the secret to his contentment. And then I don't want to ruin the verse for anybody, but in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, it's on all the posters. It's a great verse. It's a great verse to memorize. But sometimes we forget that the original context, where we find that verse, what he's talking about is being content. He's like, how can I be content when I don't have the things that I want? How can I still be content? Well, because I can do all things. I can do all this, he says. I can do all this. What is the this? Be content. In times of plenty and in times of want. In times of need. I can still be content because of Christ's strength. I need Christ's strength to be content when life around me isn't providing me what I want, what I need. That's when I need Christ's strength the most. Paul discovered there was not a single situation that he was called to face where Jesus was not with him and where Jesus was not enough. The Lord gave him the strength he needs. And that is one of his secrets to contentment, is relying on the strength of the Lord and not these other areas where it's not going to be found. During the days of the Great Depression in the 1930s, there was a panel of speakers that had gathered in the south side of Chicago. They were addressing the needs of the Great Depression, and one of the speakers was Clarence Darrow, and he was a distinguished ACLU attorney, and he was a professed atheist. And Darrow, he addressed the crowd, he addressed the terrible economic conditions that were facing everyone, especially the black community, which was predominantly present there in the gathering. And Darrow summed up their woes and their predicament, the economic struggles that they were facing. And he asked, and yet you sing? He goes, no one can sing like you do, but what do you have to sing about? And very quickly a woman shouted out, we got Jesus to sing about. And her response was followed by amens and yeses and that's right. And uncharacteristically, Clarence Darrow, he stopped dead in his tracks. He had no ammunition because he was in unfamiliar territory. He was face to face with that which can't be explained. Because people of faith can sing through tears. We can sing through pain. We can sing through struggle because we walk with the one who gives us strength. The strength to do everything that needs to be done. The devil wants us to believe that things make a person happy. He wants us to believe that all we need can be found within ourselves. That if we just, if we accumulate enough, if we are the solution to our problem. But those things are false. Paul discovered that it wasn't about being self-sufficient, but about being Christ-sufficient. Jesus was sufficient to carry him through everything that life would throw at him. And the powers that be, they can take everything away from us, but they cannot take away our faith and the unfailing power of God. So trusting in that power of God is what brings us closer to contentment. The second thing, contentment comes from putting our trust not only in the power of God, but in the unchanging promises of God. We're going to go to Philippians 19. I want to let you know, we need to skip a little bit, just so you know when we kind of skip, he's thanking, he's doing some more thank yous and thanking them for their gifts and everything. And then in 19 he says, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Jesus Christ. My God will meet your needs. So like you give to me and you help supply my needs, well, God is going to meet your needs. The unchanging promise of God is that he will meet our needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus, far more than we can imagine. But it's important to understand something that I read this week. I read a phrase this way. God doesn't promise to meet our greeds. And there's a big difference between our needs and our greeds. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told us, don't worry about food and clothes because God knows we need them. But then he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So God meets our needs. He steps in with his power. He keeps his promises to take care of us, to be with us, to give us the strength we need. But how God meets our needs, it's varied. I can't tell you how God will meet your needs in the various circumstances in your life. But however God does it, whether through your work or through the gifts of others, like Paul is sitting here and God is is providing for Paul through the generosity of the Philippians. That's how God is working in that situation. Sometimes in our situation, God works through the people in our lives and other people coming in, and sometimes He works in other mysterious ways. We don't always know how He's going to work. But however He does it, it all comes through God and it all comes from God. The Bible says every good and perfect gift comes from above. Someone has said that God gives every bird its food, but He doesn't throw the food in the nest. So sometimes trusting God to provide our needs, it doesn't mean we sit on the couch and wait for God to move. But instead we faithfully serve with what we have. We're good stewards of what we have. The talents, the abilities, the skills, the resources we have. We serve, we love, we give, we work while we wait for God to work. There's a story of a woman who lived next door to an atheistic man, and every day when the Christian woman prayed, her neighbor could hear her, and he just thought to himself, this crazy woman, praying all the time, doesn't she know there isn't a God? So many times while she was praying, he would go to her house and harass her and say, "Lady, why do you pray all the time? Don't you know there is no God?" But she kept praying. One day she ran out of groceries, and as usual, she prayed to the Lord, explaining her situation, thanking God for what He was going to do. And as usual, the atheist heard her praying and thought to himself, "I'll prove to her there is no God once and for all." So the atheist went to the grocery store, bought a bunch of groceries, took them to her house, dropped them off on the front porch, rang the doorbell, and then hid in the bushes to see what she would do. When the lady opens the door and sees the groceries, and she begins to praise the Lord with all her heart, thanking God for providing for her needs. Immediately, the atheist, he jumps out of the bushes and told her, "You silly lady, God didn't buy those groceries. I bought those groceries for you with my own money." And the Christian lady replied with great joy, "I knew the Lord would provide me with groceries, but I didn't know He was going to make the devil pay for them." The Lord works in some mysterious ways. We don't know how He'll meet our needs, but we know He always keeps His promises. Paul trusted that God would meet his needs, and when the Lord gave him much, Paul was content. When the Lord gave him little, Paul was content as well. His attitude could be summed up with this quote, "I'm always content with what happens, for I know that what God chooses is better than what I choose." That's the challenge. So that's a great way to live. It's a challenging way to live. What God chooses for me is better than what I would choose for me. Is it possible that we have such an attitude? Yeah, it's possible, but is it easy? No. But it's possible through Christ's strength. That's the secret to contentment. Trusting that the Lord will give us what we need and then being satisfied with what He gives. I want to turn over to 1 Timothy chapter 6. Starting with verse 6, if you're following along, or you can just listen, it says, this is Paul again, he's talking to Timothy this time, and he says, "Godliness with contentment is great gain." So the goal I have for you, Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain. "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it." We enter life with nothing, we exit life with nothing. So contentment is not found anywhere, and with anything that we can touch, anything that's more, better, faster, nicer, newer, better. That's not where contentment is found. We enter with nothing, we leave with nothing. So the greatest gain is not getting everything that a person could imagine, but the greatest gain, he says, is godliness with contentment. And contentment has to do with a relationship with God, where we depend on Him, we trust in Him, we trust in His presence, we trust in His power, we trust in His promise to assist us, to provide for us. Let's close with some practical suggestions for becoming more content. And the first one is just to refuse to compare yourself with others. Just to avoid comparison. Comparison is the enemy of contentment. It's the arch enemy of contentment. Because when we compare ourselves, we tend to deal with others who have more than us rather than others who have less than us. You want to make yourself miserable? Constantly compare yourself with those who have more than you do. I mean, it's easier to find someone who has a bigger income, a bigger house, who gets better grades, who got the better promotion, got the better job, is better looking or taller or thinner or better. It's easy to find those things. Entertainment and social media has amplified this. With the press of a remote or the scroll of a finger, we can instantly find people to compare ourselves to. There's no shortage of them. Got I don't know how many channels we have on our TV because it only stops in 3 places. It either stops at Hallmark, Food Network, or HGTV. And, well, that's not true. What is that Matlock's on? I can't remember that one. All right. So, and Perry Mason Matlock channel. You guys know, you know. Some of you know. All right. So, because that's all I show, Matlock and Perry Mason. All right. Where was I going? Off in Bryan land. All right. Sometimes I'll go through phases. I know where I was going. Watch HGTV if you're familiar with that. A lot of fixer-upper shows and house hunting shows. And sometimes I'll go through phases where I kind of got to step away from HGTV because it's so easy to look at all those houses I'll never have. Yeah, we're looking for a house. Our budget is $500,000. Yeah, I can't really relate to that. So anyway, there's so much out there for them. It's easy to compare ourselves, and we lose contentment when we do. And we're constantly looking at where other people have, what other people get to do. I've said it before, but social media is about everyone puts out their best face, and so we see all these perfect families doing all these perfect things. Nobody puts their blooper reel, or very few people put their blooper reel on for everybody to see. The comparison is a game that will always be the loser in. So that's the first thing, avoid comparison. Second thing is love people the way they are and not as you would like them to be. Realize you can't change people. I know we care, there's people in our lives we care about, we worry about the direction they're headed, we don't like their views, we don't like the things they do, and I'm not saying that you sit idly by and don't do anything, but realize that only God can change somebody. Because if you try to change somebody, it's not going to work, and then we can't find contentment. We're dissatisfied, we're frustrated, we're disappointed, and it hurts that relationship. We can pray for people, but only God can change people. We can love, we can encourage, and if you have the right relationship with somebody, a close enough relationship, you can advise and correct it, and even hold somebody accountable, and try to, when you have that a good enough relationship where you trust each other, and come to them, but you still can't change them, and you got to accept that. They can take what you say, and they can do what they want with it. Only God can change the person. Another thing to do is to don't worry about the things you have no control over. I don't know if you're familiar with the serenity prayer, but if you're not, just look it up. Google serenity prayer and look it up. The idea is this. It's like there's things in life that we can control. And when you pray for God to give us wisdom in those things, but there's things that are out of our control. There's no reason to worry about those things. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't control them. We can't change them. So don't worry about the things that we have no control over. And instead, lastly, is replace worry and anxiety with prayer. Back a little earlier in Philippians 4, Paul says in verse 6, it says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So he said, don't be anxious, but instead pray. And so pray with thanksgiving. Present your request to God. If you can't control it, give it to God. And that peace of God is closely tied to this idea of contentment. That peace of God that transcends understanding. So replace worry with prayer. So contentment comes from trusting in the spiritual rather than the physical. There's nothing in the physical world that will get us contentment. No person, no object, no possession, no circumstance will give us contentment in this life. So the secret of contentment is turning our focus, turning our eyes above. So regardless of the circumstances we face, we have the power of God and the promises of God. And that's our source of contentment, our source of joy, our source of peace. Trusting in the power of God, that there's no situation He can't handle, and the promises of God, He wants to handle them. He wants to take care of us. The power of God and the promises of God. We focus more on those things and less on the physical, then we'll be more content with what we have. And the great thing about that contentment, that leads us to share more, and to give more, and to serve more. Because when we operate out of a place of contentment, when we're in a place of discontentment, we're not motivated to give and to serve, because we're thinking about all the stuff we don't have. Well, why would I give? Why would I serve? Why would I do? Why would I help? When I'm not getting helped, I'm not receiving, people aren't doing anything for me. So when we're in a place of discontentment, we're not motivated to serve and to give. But when we're in a place of contentment, we're more likely to give, to help, to serve, because we're happy with where we're at, we're happy with what we have. And we are motivated to go out and to make a difference in others around. Let's pray. Father God, help us to find this elusive contentment. Help us to remember it's not found in any stuff, it's not found in anybody except you. Help us to have trust and faith in your power and your promises. Help us to be content in all situations, whether in plenty or in want, trusting in you in all things. In the name of your Son, we pray. Amen. We'll stand when we go into our song of invitation. If there's a decision you want to make, I encourage you to come forward if you'd like somebody to pray with you, or like to give your heart for Jesus. Maybe you've never done that, and you'd like to do that. Now's the time to do that. Maybe there's a decision. Maybe it's you and God to have a conversation during this song. Maybe you're not going to be singing the words. Maybe you and God have some stuff to talk about. This is the time for you and Him. There's a decision on your heart. Don't ignore it. Don't put it off. You and God have that discussion.